Okay, I don't yet have new polling about how Joe Biden's formal announcement that he's running for president has impacted his standing in the 2020 Democratic primary. But we do have fundraising numbers from Biden's first 24 hours, and he's raising a lot of money. Now, why is he raising a lot of money is what matters, and we'll get to that in a second. But in his first 24 hours after his presidential announcement, Joe Biden raised more money than any other 2020 Democratic candidate in their first 24 hours. Now, there are some caveats, and we're going to discuss them. I told you on Thursday when we talked about Joe's announcement that, politics aside, this is the biggest shakeup to the race since Bernie Sanders announced that he was getting in. And one of the impacts of Joe Biden's announcement is that a lot of the other centrist Democrats are just instantly dead in the water, right? If you're Hickenlooper, if you are Cory Booker or Amy Klobuchar or Julian Castro or Kirsten Gillibrand, and you were sort of hoping to be the safe center-left moderate Democratic vote, Joe Biden entering absolutely crushes and destroys you. But there's still the question of, okay, is Joe Biden going to be able to raise money? And so far, the answer is yes. Joe Biden raised $6.3 million in his first 24 hours after announcing. This came from 96,000 people with an average donation of $65. For comparison, Beto raised 6.1 million in his first 24 hours, and Bernie raised 5.9 million in his first 24 hours. Now, what is very different about Joe Biden than Bernie Sanders, less different than Beto O'Rourke, but very different from Bernie, is that Joe Biden is raising money from very different people than Bernie Sanders. For example, Thursday night, Joe Biden went to a fundraiser hosted by Comcast's executive vice president. He has a big Google fundraiser coming up in May with Google's CEO. Bernie, on the other hand, had way more individual donors, about 225,000 in those first 24 hours. So this is exactly as predicted. Biden is a centrist Democrat. He's more in line with Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders is not. So it's not a criticism, although I lean more in the Bernie direction than the Biden direction. But Democrats need to understand that we're kind of in a tough place here because we need to talk about this. I'm going to talk about how Democratic candidates are funded. I did a story about Beto O'Rourke removing that no lobbyists pledge from his website. Here I am telling you how Joe Biden is funded. But the right is very clever, and the right is already using these differences to play up internal divisions within the Democratic Party. Fox News immediately wrote an article about how Elizabeth Warren is slamming Biden for his swanky private fundraiser. So let's vote our policy. Let's start thinning the field, which is going to start happening soon. But let's do it in a way that doesn't hurt us in November, because otherwise it's another 4 years of Trump. And we learned since 2016 that Trump and Hillary were not the same. They would not have governed the same way. The Supreme Court is a great example. So we need to make sure we're striking a reasonable balance between, I'm going to tell you who's funding Bernie, who's funding Kamala, who's funding Joe Biden and Beto and everybody else. But we need to do it in a way that is not sort of piggybacking on and allowing the right to further internal strife within the Democratic primary, because the end result of that is another 4 years of Donald Trump. And we just can't afford it in the literal sense, in the proverbial sense. And we've got to be really careful about it. But so far, Joe Biden raising a lot of money from fewer donors, larger average donation, and some large corporate fundraisers as well, which is not a surprise. We knew that if Joe Biden announced that's who he was going to be raising a lot of money from, and he is, it doesn't change anything. We just need to decide what it is that we want.